This is Decentralized Radio. I'm Tristan.
And I'm Ryan.
The goal of this podcast is to help educate you on how to live your most optimal life. We will host industry expert guests to shed light on topics that matter.
We are not gurus, rather two individuals who have had to pave their own path to health and vitality, independent of the centralized systems that plague modern society.
On today's episode, we interviewed in person Colin, aka Arceris, in Wyoming. This is a great conversation. Colin is co-founder of a Bitcoin mining company called Distributed Hash and has a really immense knowledge on Bitcoin mining. So we dove into that topic. I think you'll enjoy it. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. We are here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, live with Colin, aka Arceris. Is it Arceris? Right?
Arceris, either way. All okay. Works.
Where did that come from? Or that was...
So, back in the 2006, 2007 era, I was playing EVE Online, which is a MMO, kind of like WoW or something like that. And I wanted a character name that was hard to pronounce, so that it would be hard for people when they called me as primary. It would be hard for them to pronounce it, so people would get confused. It worked a little bit. It did. But when I got into this space, I had that Twitter account, so I just started using it, and it seemed appropriate. Never thought I'd be on, having people actually having to pronounce it, and then having, oh wait, I actually designed it to be hard to pronounce a little bit. But yeah.
Nice, yeah. I always mix it up, I feel like, and yeah, the whole anon world of Bitcoin Twitter is really interesting to me. I feel like more and more people are coming out, but then it's like when you meet people in person, it's like, oh, you're that guy, or
yeah,
like you're that person. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I still keep myself without a picture of me. It's just the moon, but moon with the green laser beam off of it. That's my laser eye. Is the green laser beam that University of New Mexico used to do the range finding. I thought it was pretty cool, but I don't want to have my picture on my Twitter, but
That's fair. That's totally fair. So I guess maybe we could start there with your Bitcoin story. So obviously, into Bitcoin mining and everything right now, active in the space. But yeah, how did you get into Bitcoin? How did you discover it? And I think you have a pretty, I guess, some mistakes or things you wish you didn't do that maybe you could shed some light on, as all of us or a lot of us have with our Bitcoin stories.
Well, if you don't have a good origin story, then you're new to the space and you're lucky, right? So I've told the story a couple times, but basically, I was playing EVE Online and I was working night shift at a hotel, and there's not much to do. So a couple of times I wasn't playing the game. I was just reading read Slashdot, and sometime in late 2010, early 2011, I heard about it, and this is cool. And I had the gaming rig and the graphics card, so I started CPU mining and a little bit of GPU mining, and then I had access to all of these other computers that were in the hotel, so I slaved them all into mining for me, and so I had a bunch of things that were CPU mining for me back in 2011, 2012. And then I wanted a motorcycle, so I sold it all and bought a motorcycle. And a couple of years later, the motorcycle got stolen, and don't even have that anymore. But didn't really get I kept watching it, but didn't really get back into it until about 2018, 2019. And then COVID hit, and then I really got into it and decided, wait, something's up, and came back. But I came back through a shitcoin. I came back through Cardano.
Cardano.
Yeah.
Shout out to Cardano.
Cardano. But he Charles lives in just not too far from here. But now I came back through Cardano, and I realized what it was, and I kind of dumped all of that, turned it into straight Bitcoin, and then I joined the Twitter community, or late 2020, early 21. Got on through Clubhouse, met a bunch of people there, and yeah, that's basically how I ended up, here, I guess.
So wait, what was the name of the MMO you said that at the beginning of the story that you were getting into? At the beginning?
The memo?
Yeah.
I read on Slashdot about so the Slashdot had posted the white paper back then, and that's how I read about it. That's what I learned about it. Slashdot being an old, it's still around, a nerd website, computer programming and sysop website, and so I was just that's where I read about it, and that's where I decided to start playing around with it and think it'd be pretty cool, and. Yeah. I had
a couple of friends that they got into it, I think around the same time. One of them actually just retired off of a bunch of it because they stayed in. But I don't even think I was even aware. I was in high school, so I was just kind of doing my high school stuff then. But it's funny talking about all that old.
Well, it was all the CPUs too. They're all Mac Minis. So I had about 17 Mac Minis that were mining for me, and it's not apocryphal. I can actually point to the those are the transactions where I transferred it all. But they over the course of about 6 months, it was enough to buy a pretty crappy motorcycle. Back then, I think when I sold it, it was 14, 15, something like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and then I bought back in, much higher.
How did your supervisor feel about you using all the computers in the?
Well, I owned the hotel.
Okay,
so yeah, it was my hotel.
That does help when you own the hotel, I suppose.
Yeah, so it was actually a large bed and breakfast, and we had put Mac Minis in each of the rooms to be the sort of so people could watch. I don't know. Netflix wasn't that common back then, but we could do Netflix on it. You could do movies on it and things like that. So it was basically like an in-room entertainment center before that became really common from hotels to have. And so, but it was actually run off of a full size, a fully capable Mac Mini, which didn't. When somebody wasn't booking the room, I would just tell it to do the Bitcoin mining.
That's cool. No, last thing I'll ask you, I'll hand it back to Tristan, but I was just curious, like at that time, just from a mindset perspective, were you viewing Bitcoin as mostly like a stock then?
I was just viewing it as a toy. I mean, this is cool. People will trade it. I didn't go down the economics rabbit hole. If it was a technology toy, something fun to play with. And I didn't really. That's why I didn't keep any of it. That's why I was like, oh, I can get a motorcycle. That's cool. I didn't get the economics of it. I didn't get the sound money aspects. I didn't. All of the tech aspects of it were fun to play with, but it wasn't really to me. It wasn't earth shattering then, and it wasn't until 2019 really that it started to click. And of course, I came back in, like I said, through other crypto, and then I wanted to understand it from the beginning. So I went through and read the white paper, started to read things about the economics of it, and to understand why this stuff is the way it is. And that's when I said, wait, this other stuff is crap. And I got rid of it and went, straight into Bitcoin and never looked back.
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like the COVID crash of 2020 really, it was for me. Like I was shitcoining hard, like from 2017 to 2020 probably, and trading and losing Bitcoin. And that kind of just awoken to like my realization of everything that's going on. It's kind of crazy. Like that, I remember that day in general, like everything went out the door. And people thought it was going to zero. Everything was going to zero.
Everything was moving. Everything was dropping simultaneously. It was just a liquidity crunch. People needed cash. They needed to pay off loans. So gold, Bitcoin, the stock market, treasuries, everything went down simultaneously because it was a flight to liquidity. That wasn't the period that I bought, unfortunately, because that would have been awesome. But I did, however, I am a little bit lucky in that. Back in 2011, 2012, when you were mining, you could do something called merge mining, which you can still do with some other coins. But back then, you could merge mine Bitcoin and Namecoin. And I didn't sell any of that Namecoin back then. So I did have all of that And because of the run up in price when things got crazy, it was enough to start me off on my journey without completely,
So Namecoin was still around, like,
oh yeah,
2020.
You can still play it. You can still trade it now. It's not. I mean, it's pointless, but it's still there. People will still buy it for some reason.
That's hilarious. So back then, what, like 2012 or 2011, the hash or the Bitcoin per block was what? Was it?
It was 50. It was 50. I mean, yeah, I was effectively pulling down one whole Bitcoin every 5 days off of CPUs that were already running and doing. It was either that. I basically, some of them were running Bitcoin, some of them were occasionally running SETI at home and folding at home and stuff like that. And it was just basically, what are the empty cycles going to be doing? Am I going to donate them or am I going to turn into Bitcoin? And pretty soon I realized, wait, I can sell this stuff. So I turned them all into Bitcoin. But it was one whole Bitcoin every 5 days off of the 17 Mac Minis. And it was the predecessor to Brains Pool. Slush Pool, but I think I may be incorrect, but I think it was actually called something else back then. But that's the first pool, and that's the one I was mining to. And yeah.
And you sold it on what, Mt. Gox? Or?
Yeah, I think I sold it on Mt. Gox.
Wow.
And wired. Back then I think you wired the money or ACH'd it or something, and yeah, I just got it back into my some of it back into my account that way, and some of it what I effectively did is I was buying things anyway. So I would use the Bitcoin to buy things like the majority of it was sold for the motorcycle, but some of it else. I bought a seed box, so you could BitTorrent stuff without having to. And so I did, since I didn't have my credit card attached to it. It was kind of nice. And then I had a couple of other things like a domain name that I had back then that I paid for with that. I mean, kind of everything you look back and like, really?
That's cool. Well, I guess, it's cool that you're mining again now in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we do a little Bitcoin mining 101, because this is our first this deeper discussion about Bitcoin mining in general. We've talked about Bitcoin a little bit, a few guests, but I feel like this is a topic that people don't understand. There's so much common criticism from like Elizabeth Warren and the likes of about energy consumption. And the reason why I asked, the block Bitcoin reward total is because obviously now that's a lot lower. It's what, 6.25?
It's 6.25 now, and I think right about this time next year it'll drop to 3.125.
Yeah, the next halving. So I don't know, where do we start? How would you explain, how just Bitcoin is mined or put into circulation at a high level?
So the mining is a great term that's absolutely horrible to describe what it is, but it's a great term in that it's succinct. But you're not mining, obviously. You're not doing anything like that. It's some people say you're solving really complex equations. That's not even it. You're basically rolling dice. And the difficulty is such that the difficulty adjustment sets it so that on average there will only be one computer that finds the proper hash to secure the block. So that's effectively what you're doing, is you're looking for a number that mathematically determines that the hash for the block has a certain number of leading zeros, and it's truly a random process. And the difficulty is set such that one of those will be found roughly every 10 minutes. So I have machines that run roughly 100 to 110 terahash. So that's 110 trillion rolls of the dice per second per machine. And there's tens of thousands of those running, or maybe even millions of those running on the planet at any one time. So you're talking quintillions or septillions of rolls of the dice per second, such that only one of those gets found every 10 minutes. And once that's found, the machine that, or the miner that found that block gets paid the reward. Usually it's the pool, because people assemble to defray their risk. And that's what I do. So all of our customers, all of our miners go into a pool, not necessarily the same pool. People can choose whatever pool they want, and you can move it instantaneously from one pool to the other. But and that process, in order for the machine to do those large number of dice rolls per second, it does burn a lot of it, or it does utilize a lot of energy. That's a feature, not a bug. It's necessary. That's the proof of work. The necessary expenditure of all of that energy is what proves that you have done the work so that it can't be faked. So if somebody were to attempt to fake it, they'd have to burn the same amount of energy. So there's no point in faking it. Unlike, say, proof of stake, where the rules could be just changed based on number of votes you have. The proof of stake that Ethereum has is a little bit more devious and not, that's the wrong word, I guess, well designed than that. But proof of stake really just boils down to the number of votes you have, whereas proof of work does actually require the use of energy, which is why somebody like Elizabeth Warren would be against it, because A, she's against the use of energy in any kind, and B, she doesn't like that the use of energy is such that it prevents her from controlling the system, her and her ilk. So
yeah, I mean that makes sense. I guess so basically it's like game of odds. So like the more you have running, the higher odds of getting that pool.
Yes.
Right?
So if your pool has the more hash power that your pool has access to, the more likely it is going to be that it will be the one finding the block. And then so for instance, I still use and a lot of people, it's not a dominant pool, but a lot of people still use Slush Pool, or now Brains Pool. And they find roughly 6, 7, 8 blocks a day. So take that, multiply out not just the 6.25, but also the block reward, which because of various factors, that block reward itself is sitting at somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4. So you're looking at maybe 6 3/4 per block, and then the pool will take that reward and divvy it out to the participants in the pool with respect to the amount of effort that those participants had provided. So if you're 1% of the pool, you should get roughly 1% of the reward. Now it fluctuates because people fall off, turn on and turn off, switch pools, whatever. So
is that solely based on hash rate and hash power, or is it like actively how much effort that specific piece of hardware is like putting in?
So that particular piece of hardware is putting in the hash power, and the hash power is directly related to how much it's both the measure of the effort and the measure of
it's not like a predetermined spec.
That's correct. Yes, it's not a predetermined spec. It's so if you have one machine and it's if you have like one S9, which is an older machine, and that is providing 12 to 15 terahashes, you're not going to get very much. You're probably not even going to break even, because the electrical the amount of electrical power that machine is burning is close to 1,400 watts, or 1.4 kilowatts per hour, and so it's probably returning you 5 USD cents per hour, but you're costing you 14 to 20 USD cents per hour. Unfortunately, we still have to rate everything in USD because that's what the power company wants. They don't. If you're lucky if you can pay your power bill in pure Bitcoin, but so a lot of it still has to get referred back to USD. But even though you may be, quote, losing USD on the trade, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad trade, because you can do things. It's generating, you're burning, and you're utilizing energy. That energy is converted into the Bitcoin work, but it's also converted into heat. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I actually heated my house in the winter here in Wyoming when it was down in the -20, -40 range with 3 S9s. Was that profitable on a pure USD Bitcoin exchange? Absolutely not. But I needed the heat anyway. Might as well get a little bit of sats back from my power bill. So that's effectively what I did. And not only did I get sats back on my power bill, because I was generating the heat with a Bitcoin miner instead of an electric resistive heater, which would have been the same amount of cost, but those are all KYC free sats, and so it's pretty awesome that way.
Yeah, that actually kind of goes into the question I was going to ask, just because I'm curious. We had someone named Michael on the podcast several weeks ago, and he was using basically the heat produced from all this mining to heat greenhouses. And I thought that was like a pretty interesting idea. So like, what are some like practical applications for energy use? And maybe we can sort of like dispel some of the stuff about how like the energy needed to do it, because I think there's just huge misconception. And also people don't understand any of this stuff anyway. So kind of just like giving a high level would be good, I think.
Okay. Well, so what the Bitcoin miners produce what's called low grade heat. And that just means that it's not hot enough to boil water. Okay. So you're not gonna use your Bitcoin miner to make whiskey, or you're not gonna use your Bitcoin miner to in high level industrial processes that need a lot of focused heat. But that doesn't mean low grade heat doesn't mean that's not a knock against it, because there's a lot of applications where you want low grade heat. One would be your domestic hot water. You don't want boiling water to come out of your tap when you turn on your, to take a shower. You want it to be roughly 120, 130 Fahrenheit. Well, low grade heat is perfect for that. Low grade heat is also great for heating a residential space or a greenhouse. Another thing that people have been using the Bitcoin miners to do is to make beef jerky, because you're basically whenever you have a heating element, you're drying things out. So and the Bitcoin miners are moving at an absolute ton of air, so you have effectively a drying application. So people are thinking about, okay, how do I use the miners to do clothes drying, which you could do. Now, the starting and stopping and things like that make it a little bit more tricky, because the miners don't like being turned on and off. But that for space heaters in a house, for a friend of mine, Bikes and Bitcoin, will plug his miners directly into his central heat. So that's not even space heating; that's actually central heat. And doing it for drying out foods, for heating greenhouses, and if you can convert the heat into liquid, you can actually put it into water and use it for domestic hot water and other situations like that. And I think there's at least one hotel I think it's in Europe, that actually does that for, you could call it commercial scale hot water. So, I mean, you need to burn the energy anyway. So might as well have it, do something useful also. So anytime you can do that, where you take the process and link it to another thing. Other people, I think, have actually used this not just to heat a greenhouse, but to heat like stock ponds, to heat chicken coops in the winter, to prevent them from getting. Well, because up here we get really cold. It's a little bit less of an interesting thing in Texas, where where it doesn't get super cold in the winter. Although, last year they did, or 2 years ago, they did get really cold, and so much so that they froze their windmills. So,
I think that's really cool. It's like, but those are all with S9s mostly, right? Because there can be run off 120.
Yeah, so S9s run off of 120.
So you can plug it in your wall outlet if you don't know what that means.
Yeah, so you can it's standard residential wall outlet. You can run the more modern miners off of 220, which is a stove outlet or a dryer outlet. So you can get access to that kind of power in a residential environment, but it's a little bit more tricky. The other reason why you might want to run
4 kilowatts?
3 to 3.5.
3. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just need to make sure your breaker is sized appropriately.
Yeah, this is it. When you want to start doing things like that, you can't just it's not just a plug and play application. But the S9s will plug into any wall outlet that can handle like a TV, because they take 12 amps. And most standard residentials rated for 15. The other reason why people want to use S9s for these things is because they're cheap, like $100 for one of these. So you're not. Whereas if you're getting an M30, M50, S19, which are the current state of the art ones. Yeah, they're a lot more efficient. Yeah, you'll make a lot more sats off that than for the same input, but you're also going to be paying Well, you can get M30s now for $1,500, $1,400, $1,300 if you get some used ones and you're willing to hunt. But the higher end stuff, you're still looking at $1,800, $1,900. Whereas S9, $100, $150. Give it a shot, try it out. Not a big investment, and you don't have to do any work on your house because it's just plugging straight into the wall.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know Ryan mentioned the energy consumption, but I want to talk about the semiconductors for a little bit, or the ASICs, it's just application specific ICs. So, the semiconductor shortage kind of inflated price is alongside the bull run. But regardless, there's like these next generation, you're talking about going from 15, 20 terahash per second to like over 100.
Yep.
What does the future look like? Is this Moore's law kind of run out, or is there actually like this progression kind of in line with every halving that we're going to be like 200, 300, 400 terahash per second? Or do you see that kind of tapering? And yeah, I'm just curious because it's, obviously the halving is coming next spring or early summer, right? So obviously every mining company right now is just trying to mine as much Bitcoin as they possibly can.
Yep.
And that shift has, happened to mostly being, these higher efficiency miners. When does that next shift kind of happen to the next gen? Is there a next gen that's like substantially better, and when does it come?
Well, so inside the mining, you've got multiple factors that you're fighting against. You've got obviously the die size, or which is directly proportional to the efficiency of the chip itself. So that the smaller the die, you mentioned 15 nanometer. I think that's what S9s are. I think some of the more modern things that are commonly available are like 7, and the cutting edge stuff, I think they're at 5. But that's what Moore's law gets you. The other things that you can do to increase, not really efficiency, but I guess the capacity, is getting the heat away from the chip as fast as possible. And so that's when you go from air cooling. People have been screwing around with immersion, which is taking a non-conductive oil and just dunking the machine into it. That works very well. I don't like it myself because it has its problems. But it is extremely effective for the people who want to do it.
The liquid's pretty cold then, right?
Well, it's I think they circulate it around, so it's not chilled, because chilling it is you could chill things, but that's basically adding more power to the system, because for every watt you take out, you have to basically put it back in, right? Or every watt you put in, you have to take it out. So it's going to cost you just as much to chill it as it would just to add more. So I prefer water cooling, which is technically more challenging than oil immersion, because oil immersion, you just dunk it into it. With water cooling, you have to design the pumping system. You have to design the chips such that they mate with a water block, because obviously water and electronics don't mix, so you can't let the two actually touch, but you want to get the water very close and move it around. The reason why I like water cooling is the specific heat capacity of water is much higher than oil. You can move it around without specialized equipment. If you spring a leak, okay, yeah, you might wreck one machine, but it's not flammable. Whereas oil immersion, it's basically you have a deep fryer with a bunch of electronics and inside it. And yeah, they have oils that are less likely to ignite. Those are much more expensive. But the other side of the coin with the oil immersion is it's oil. So it's slowly getting all this crap building into it. And when you've driven a car, you've had motor oil, you put it in, it's nice and clean. When you take it out, it's not. It's got all the engine stuff, collected in it. Well, that happens with the immersion mining too. The oil has a life cycle, and when you're done with it, now you have to dispose of all of this oil. That's not necessarily got pleasant. It's probably got if there's lead in the circuit board, it's probably got lead in it, although most things are not made with lead these days, but it might have copper and other things that you don't want to just dump it on the ground. And if you did that in an industrial scale, the EPA might have something to say about that. And you can't just burn it because you'd let all those things in the atmosphere. So what do you do with the used oil? Whereas in a water block immersion system, the water is never touching the electronics. It's just touching the copper block. And so it's a lot easier to deal with. So you don't have if you spring a leak, you don't have to have an environmental problem. You're not, dealing with things that it might just go up in flames. And so with the water, you can directly put it into a residential system. And if you spring a leak, you're not, bathing in oil either.
Does the oil reduce the lifetime of an ASIC?
No, I think it actually does increase it.
Oh,
because
it's just the heat. It's
that heat. The ASICs.
What is the average lifetime, I guess, you think?
So a lot of people think that the lifetime of an ASIC is when the halving happens and the people will throw away their old ASICs. That is completely false.
That's when they're selling them.
Yeah. The S9s, which are 2 generations old, they're still viable if you have the right use and you can make, if the power's cheap enough or you have a use for the heat, they're still viable. So in that case, you're really just talking about mean time before failure of boards, which, I see boards fail. When you have a mine with hundreds of machines, you're going to see some that fail every now and then, but we're not talking constant failures. We're talking every couple of months I might see a failure, and usually it's the power supplies, not the hash boards. And so you can swap out the power supplies at a couple $100. You swap those out and fix them, and then the hash boards just keep chugging along. I think in a year and a half, I think we've actually had a total of 2 hard board failures, which were where they just popped, and that just happened. So out of, call it 250 machines, each with 3 hash boards, we've had 2 failures, two boards, not 2 machines, in a year and a half. That should give you roughly that these things are not just dying. They're going to keep chugging along, just like any old computer equipment. I mean, you can people have 1990s era machine sit in their attic. They could fire it up and run Linux on it.
I don't need a new iPhone every 2 years.
No, you probably don't. But yeah,
it's a software.
Yeah, and these things, the software just keeps chugging along. There's nothing special about it.
So going back to the next generation, what's coming?
Well, so both WhatsMiner and Antminer, the 2 dominant manufacturers, have come out with fairly interesting water block or hydro systems. I personally think the WhatsMiner version of that is significantly more interesting. They've packaged it. Historically, miners have been in these wonky shoebox sort of configurations that are not really conducive to high density applications. The WhatsMiner M53, I think it's an M50, or maybe it's M54. Anyway, their hydro version is a standard 2U rack mount server package, so it could now fit into any server hardware situation. And a lot of places like Google and Amazon in their big data centers are also using water immersion, so it could just plug straight into one of their systems. As long as they have the right kind of power. And so they do have specialized power supplies that are not integral to the machine, but if you can provide it with the power that it wants, these things can just plug right in. And one of the things that they did is HeatCore is partnered with WhatsMiner, and they made it's the size of a 100-gallon water heater, and it has, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 of these 2U rack mount packages in it, and basically can produce heat like a 100-gallon water heater, except off of electricity, and then it just pumps it around.
And those are 150 terahash per second, or
I think those
53? Or are they in the 130s? So
they're pulling 6 kilowatts each. So I think they're closer to 275. But
is that with the cooling?
That's what they need the cooling and all that, but they need but they're pulling a lot more juice. So you call it like 2. So they're basically 2.5 M30s.
Okay.
For the power consumption of 2. And
that's out like now, or it's out soon.
I don't know if it's purchasable now, but I know that they're demoing it now. They brought it out, and I saw a version of it last August at Mining Disrupt in Miami. Mm-hmm. And I know that in October they had the official release in State College, Pennsylvania, and I think they're partnering with a couple of the hut manufacturers to see what they can do. I think Upstream Data, I think they've got their hands on some. I bet you some of the others have as well. Trying to figure out how to use these things, because the other nice thing about having a packaged system like that, where it's closed loop circulating water, nothing will get into it, right? So the air cooled systems are awesome because they're easy, but you're pushing air through it, so they're going to collect dust, they're going to collect dirt, cat hair. I've seen quite a few machines that were sent to us from people who are running them in their house that were just caked in cat hair. But the chip boards, the ASIC boards, won't get any of that cruft on them with the water system. So there's definitely a lot of advantages to that, using it in more hostile environments. So,
does air cooling take more energy than? Or does water take more energy than air cooling?
Yes, functionally, I think the water would take more energy, but we're talking triviality here, because you're moving the water around, and so there's a pump involved. But with the air, you have fans, so no pun intended.
So it's really just, do you want cat hair in it or not?
Yeah. And also the air cooling is less efficient overall. So when you take the whole system as a package, the water cooling is probably adding a lot of efficiencies to the whole system, because air is more of an insulator than a conductor. So,
no, that's cool. I was actually talking to a Bitcoiner last week who's building a data center, and he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna run our servers, but also mine Bitcoin," and that seems like the perfect application. I'm sure like Amazon and Google, those guys are thinking about that too. They're just
they have
not telling us, probably.
Oh yeah, and if they have the slots for it, might as well throw one in there. Right. I mean, if they've got if they don't need the server hardware, they can plug those in and do something else with it, and then you have the slots, so you can move them out. The other thing you can do with like if you have if you're making the hot water, right, you're going to dump the heat, so you can just have the machines running all the time. So this is where in a hotel environment, I've thought a lot about this, because I did have the hotels. Had I been interested in keeping them, I would have replaced the hot water heaters with these things, because you basically just run them constantly. They keep the hot water at the exact right temperature. If they make too much hot water, you just dump the heat into the atmosphere like you would do with an air cooled system anyway. But you also can make sure that the hot water is circulating around, and it's much more pleasant, and you can actually do things like add the extra heat to hydronic flooring. So if you have a hot water system, it doesn't preclude you from using it for residential air heat, because you could put it into the nice water heated flooring, or even things like baseboard heating if they're run with hot water.
That's really cool. I guess from also the semiconductor perspective, I don't know, are what's miner and miner I'm assuming a lot of these companies are either in China or Taiwan. Is that like a large concern in like the consensus, like U.S. miners? Because obviously it's a large concern for everybody, I think, in the semiconductor, political world of things right now. But I'm curious how that angle is formed from the mining coalition.
I'm very concerned about that. I'm not on the production side, but as a consumer of those things, I am very concerned, because like you said earlier, when the chip shortage hit, I mean, you couldn't get the things, and that's just because all of the chips really are coming through all the fabs in Taiwan. There aren't any U.S. producers yet. I believe Jack Dorsey and Block are trying to remedy that internally. Intel was producing some chips, but they killed that program a couple months ago, which is unfortunate because that would have given us a third option at least, and that was that wasn't quite as tightly linked to China and Taiwan. But if there's political unrest in that part of the world, then getting new machines will get more difficult. If there's if the companies involved decide to shut it down and not give Antminer or What's Miner fab space, then miners get harder to get access to, and prices go way up. But at the same time, when prices go up, old miners get more profitable and can be turned on. So
that's kind of how I thought about it, because like China's so weird with like their stance on Bitcoin. Obviously, a huge percentage of the hash rate like was there, and now I guess we don't really know. I mean, maybe you know better than I, but obviously that went down a lot. But they're still going to want to sell like semiconductor and ASICs to people, whether the fab space thing, prioritization, probably that could be a factor. It's just interesting to think about if that does progress, China taking over Taiwan or whatever, how that could impact Bitcoin as a whole.
Well, it was definitely interesting because they had, if they wanted to crush Bitcoin, that was their chance. They could have seized the machines and destroyed them, or seized them and used them themselves. Instead, they they told everybody to turn them off, and they let them send them out of the country. So they were not thinking like getting rid of Bitcoin. They just wanted to get rid of Bitcoin on their shores, or they just hadn't thought that completely through, or maybe they just didn't care and they just didn't want it in their country. But they let those machines leave China, and so a lot of the hash rate moved to here, to Kazakhstan, to other countries. Yeah.
But is there still like a good chunk in China? Just
oh yeah,
right.
A lot of the stuff that stayed in China went underground, at least at the time. I think it's gotten their restrictions on it have eased a little bit, as I understand. But so now there's more clear cut hash coming from China. But at the time, everybody said, "Oh, China went to zero." I was like, "No, it didn't. They just." They just stopped purporting they were from China, or using things like VPNs and other such things.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't know much about that, so that was like totally blowing my mind there a second ago. I mean, I guess actually like mine's more of like I think for the lesser knowing people, because I read Tristan's book Bitcoin Beef. I was talking to my dad about it. Some friends of mine who don't really look at it as much more than a stock. How do you I would sort of like look back on, I was going to ask you on your personal journey, like in 2019, how did that come about for you, so that like you looked at it in a more practical fashion? I think it's more, I think people are thinking that way more now after 2020 than they were maybe before that, as far as like decentralization of their like just in like money and all this stuff, and different stuff in the dollars like coming down and all that stuff. These are all things I didn't think about till I read Tristan's book. But it's sort of like a question of like, how did you get to there from like a practical standpoint?
Well, I saw it because I when I came back into it, I jumped into it feet first onto the economic side, and
I guess too, just to couple on that, because this is like something that people are going to probably shit on me in the comments or whatever, but I fell into a bunch of shit coins too, probably like everyone did at some point. I had Cardano, I had Voyager, I had some really fun ones. Doge, that was just for fun.
Everybody's got
it. But everyone's got Doge. But sort of like, what makes Bitcoin the king of that stuff? Like what? Because there's like so many other coins. So like, why is Bitcoin like the big dog? And actually, where does Ethereum sit with that now? Because I've heard that go back and forth with like people before in discussion.
Well, Ethereum is still second to Bitcoin in terms of market cap, anyway. But so that's a very big question. Why? One of the reasons why Bitcoin, one of the reasons why Bitcoin is at the top is it has the hard cap of 21 million. So it's got that absolute scarcity. It's not there yet. I mean, it won't technically get to the full emission of all of its coins until 2140. But because it's an exponentially decaying curve where it's halving every 4 years, we're at over 90% now. So within 10 more years, that's 2.5 more halvings. We're going to be something like at 99%, very, very, the vast majority of it's going to be out there. So the tail emission of it will be effectively negligible at that point. The fact that you cannot change the economics of Bitcoin without having effectively everyone else in the network agree. And so let's say somebody wanted to double the supply, go from 21 to 42 million. Why would anyone agree to that? The only way that they're going to get a hard fork to survive, and a hard fork being where they create their new rule and take the chain and move it to create a secondary chain or a rump chain that comes off of it. The only reason why that would become dominant is if the majority of the economic value also moved along with it. But everyone else, there's no way to make that change such that it benefits more than half of the people durably. So yeah, you could go to 42, but why would I agree to that? Why? So because of the game theory, Bitcoin isn't, technically speaking, Bitcoin isn't all that interesting. It's got, aside from the fact that the guy solved basically 2 Nobel Prize winning or Nobel Prize worthy problems, but fundamentally, it's not about the tech. It's about the game theory. It's about the fact that Satoshi, whoever he, she, they were, they have the game theory so solid that nothing can change without everyone else agreeing, but nobody else is going to agree because it will damage their position. So all you have to do to expect Bitcoin to work is expect that everyone is in it for themselves. Now, you can have altruism in that system, but simply the fact that you're not depending on the good graces of other people, that's enough to make it work. Whereas something like Ethereum, they had the DAO hack, and which I would say is a misnomer. It wasn't a hack at all, but they rolled it back. Well, how could they roll it back? They could roll it back because enough of the dominant players could roll it back. They proved that their economic underpinnings are not solid, that they can change them. Bitcoin can't do that. That's fundamentally the thing that makes it so solid, and that makes it look more like a commodity, more like gold than a stock. And similarly, Bitcoin doesn't pay it. Unlike stocks, technically can pay dividends. Not all of them do, but they can pay dividends. Bitcoin can't. There's no economic value in the future to a Bitcoin other than the fact that other people will want it. Fundamentally, that's the same with gold. All value is fundamentally extrinsic. There's no such thing as intrinsic value. People say, "Oh, gold has intrinsic value because it's gold." No, it doesn't. If I put you on a desert island with a metric ton of gold and no water, how much gold would you give me to give you water? That gold is worthless. The only value, all value, or at least economic value, is exchange value. So Bitcoin's value is because other people value it. So if everyone else in the world decides that Bitcoin is worthless, okay, well, then it dies. Well, fiat money is the same. Gold is the same. Anything out there has that problem. So if you have a money that can be artificially inflated, though, that makes it weaker. So you can sort of steal from the future exchanges for yourself, but you can't do that as easily with gold, and you certainly can't do that very easily at all with Bitcoin. So
I think that's a cool way to put it. I think, obviously given the environment can dictate, what gold is used for jewelry or semiconductors, but Bitcoin also may have some contextual intrinsic value, quote unquote, right? And that's in, its beneficial use in our power grid.
Oh, yeah.
Large flexible load. I think that's what it's denominated as now, right? LFL. So yeah, maybe we talk about that a little bit, because the energy consumption, I don't know what the network consumes annually now. When I wrote my book, it was like 150 terawatt hours a year. Maybe it's closer to 200 now.
Probably much more than that.
Much more? Okay.
So when did you finish your book?
2021. So it's been a couple of years.
Okay. So yeah, our exahash is at least double.
Okay. So it's closer to 300, which if you're not familiar, folks like Elizabeth Warren always, compare it to a small country. I think when I wrote, it was Ukraine. Probably now it's like a more developed European country or something like that. But yeah, it's a lot of energy, but people don't realize that a lot of that is, sustainable, or some of it's otherwise wasted energy. And then 3, more importantly, is that it's a very flexible consumer of energy. So maybe shed some light there.
So when you're talking about large scale mining, not home mining, not like one or two machines, but more like, 1,000, 5,000 machines. Technically, you could do this with any data center, but Amazon would have a problem.
They can't have downtime.
Yeah, exactly. They can't have downtime. Well, so while it is technically feasible that Netflix or Amazon could shut their computers off at a moment's notice, they're not going to want to. Whereas Bitcoin miners, the value is in the uptime, but it doesn't specifically matter which uptime you get. So if there is you want the cheapest power you can get. So if you can get a discount on your power that makes it worthwhile, and part of the deal is, we need the power, so you're going to shut off, you're going to do it. Or you could have a situation where you're running at like 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and all of a sudden, like you're in Texas or something, and they hit you with for the next 15 minutes, you're going to be at 45 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. You're going to shut off because all of a sudden they made your machines not profitable. So you can do that in a moment on a dime, like boom, you turn them off. Granted, you probably not instantaneously, but you over the course of about 10, 15, 20 seconds, you can turn all those machines off, which means now you have taken that load and shunted it back and given that load back to the grid. So if there is a demand situation where, say, there's a cold snap and everybody turns on their heaters at 5 o'clock because all of a sudden they got home from work and their houses are cold, they turn on their electric heaters, the Bitcoin miners can turn off, and the power grid can effectively flow that power away from the Bitcoin miners and into people's houses. And then when they don't need that heat anymore, the Bitcoin miners can turn back on and pull that power back to the Bitcoin mine. Whereas, and so the main power plants don't have to ramp up or ramp down. Turning those things on and turning them off can take, if they're even gas-fired plants can take hours. They're not like turned on overnight. And things like nuclear plants, which are, of course, carbon-free, and the fact that Europe is getting rid of them, or at least Germany is getting rid of them, is absolutely stupid. I think, was it Finland just turned one on and their residential power rates went negative because they have too much power. But that aside, nuclear plants can't ramp anywhere near that fast. Coal plants can't ramp that fast. Wind, they don't ramp. And what if the sun's not shining? It's the middle of the night this happens or something. So the ability to have effectively a negative generator, right? So it's like a generator that you can get power up by turning off. That's kind of how Bitcoin mining can be looked at. It's a negative generator. So you turn it off, the power goes to other uses. The actual power plants don't have to scale. They don't have to turn up and turn down. They don't have to add more capacity or take capacity or shed capacity, all of which are worse for the environment, worse for the grid, cost more. So effectively large flexible loads or negative generators or demand response that Bitcoin can provide reduces costs for the end consumer, makes things more efficient, allows you to level out the fluctuations that wind and solar provide, while at the same time, providing stability for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's so cool to me that that's like an application. And I mean, I think someone even said that on the, reverse of that, it's like there's so much energy sometimes wasted that it's like they just need a resistive load. So worst case, Bitcoin miners can just be like glorified toasters, but then you can monetize that, which is funny. But
and the other thing you can do is that you said you're talking about wasted energy. Well, in oil and natural gas mining, there's stranded energy in that there's these flares where there's literally gas that they can't capture. Either they're too far from a gas line, or for whatever reason they can't use it. You can plug Bitcoin miners into those with a genset, burn it from natural gas into carbon dioxide. Use that energy for the Bitcoin mine and recover it. Whereas previously, all you were doing was literally lighting it on fire. And pushing the natural gas through a genset is significantly more efficient than just burning it, because you're talking 99% versus 95%, or even maybe it's higher than 99%. But you have a flare that's getting blown around by the wind. It's leaking some methane anyway, and methane is 100 times worse for greenhouse. It's 100 times more greenhouse effective than carbon dioxide. So turning it into carbon dioxide is a massive net benefit. At least that's what people who are smarter on this tell me.
Scientists.
Yeah. But so why wouldn't you do that? And the other people say, well, if you're doing that, why don't you just plug that power into the grid? You can't. It's not the same. It's not. You can't just plug random power into the grid, and a lot of times these things are too far away anyway.
Yeah, it's an infrastructure problem. I think people don't understand that. They also don't understand just resistive losses from transmission.
Yeah.
Like the further something is away, the more electricity is wasted, or power is wasted. Power is lost. How often so you're saying it's only big scale mining companies. I know like ERCOT, Energy Reliability Council of Texas, obviously is working with, Riot and the big boys down there. And they had, a great example, I think was last winter, where they, returned megawatts, or maybe it was even a gigawatt back to the...
with Riot is gigawatts. Yeah.
Gigawatts, but there's a couple gigawatts back to it was enough like to heat like 500,000 homes. Which is amazing. But I guess, I think, including myself, you can often, romanticize this and talk about this a lot. But like, how often is this actually happening? Like, how often are Bitcoin miners like going offline? Like someone like Riot, like it's got to be pretty seldom.
It's not. So it's going to be based on their contract. So 5% might be a little high. But it's going to be down in Texas. It's going to be a lot more common because they have that whole direct billing by the minute, or by the very short period of time, where they can actually tell Riot, okay, you need to turn off in the next 15 minutes, or maybe even faster than that. But even up here in Wyoming, where there's the possibility to do small scale, like 1, 2, 3 megawatt size curtailment. And in that case, it wouldn't be very often, but places like Texas, it's like you said, it's going to be when there's a weather event. So 99% of the time that it's clear skies, everything's going great. Then they have a hurricane or a ice storm or something like that, and they need the power. That's what it's there for.
So I kind of have a question too, and you definitely would know more about this than me. But we last night at dinner, we were all having dinner, and we were trying to talk about between Bitcoin and like regenerative ag, and sort of going back and forth, and sort of how those sort of ideas sort of intertwine and stuff like that. And a lot of regenerative ag, from discussions I've had with farmers, and we spoke to someone named Cody spoke to a couple people about just how difficult it is to do on like a mass scale. But I guess my question with like this type of stuff, we're talking about all the energy applications, but the question is like the people that control all these things that could make the changes necessary to put Bitcoin in a place where we could have like it put back energy into the grid and all that stuff. And there's all these things with like green energy with like solar and wind that we've sort of been talking about. And actually recently watched an interesting documentary on nuclear talking about basically the pitfalls of wind and solar. And there's a lot. But sort of like how does that work on like a larger scale when seems like the people that control all the legislature and stuff don't want that to happen, and they don't want these like practical applications. How does that work? Is it like sort of more localized level and sort of like that? And I only brought up regenerative ag because that's how it seems to be like with those operations. It's like we just need more localization of that. Would that be similar to Bitcoin? Or
in a lot of ways, you're right. Yeah, it's the best work in that is being done at the state level. Obviously, the feds are the feds, but for instance, you could see recently there's a bit of a fight down in Texas because a couple of people didn't like that Bitcoin was doing these large flexible loads, and they didn't like how Riot was getting paid for all this stuff, and they thought that ERCOT had too much of demand response and not enough production. So there was people were building the production side of demand response, which is basically micro gas plants, where they would, when demand would go up, they would be able to ramp up these little micro plants very fast and produce produce whatever additional electricity they needed at a very high rate. Well, Bitcoin is the opposite, right? It's a negative generator, so it turns itself off. So it's actually cheaper. But these people down in Texas were arguing that we can't have too much Bitcoin because it'll damage the financials of these micro plants. Well, all these micro plants happen to be owned by Warren Buffett. So a little bit of political pull there, but those particular bills that would have impacted Bitcoin mining in a negative way were, I believe, defeated in Texas. So these battles need to be waged, just like with Regen Ag. These battles need to be waged at the local and state level, because the national level, they're not going to care. Although at least U.S. national. Now you go to other countries, El Salvador, they get it. Of course, they always have, right? But at least they have since Bukele got in there. But I think some other countries are starting to figure this out as well. But in general, it's the smaller the pond you're playing in, the more likely you're going to be able to get people who actually get it. And I think that's one of the reasons why Wyoming is so great, because Wyoming was the first state to pass all of these generally Bitcoin-friendly rules here, and several states, Tennessee, Texas, and a couple others, have followed suit. But I choose to mine here, even though the electricity is not the cheapest, because everything else about it is better for me here. But similarly, they get it here, and they don't on the national level.
Is there a concern that, like, at a certain point, miners become more and more expensive, like in the future, like the barrier to entry becomes much higher, so inherently, like, the Riots of the world, like, it becomes centralized? And I'm pretty sure people argue that right now, but how do you see that unfolding, and is that a concern? It's
a concern. Yeah, absolutely. Centralization of mining overall at mega scales becomes concerning. Right now, people argue that the number of pools is insufficient, and I would agree with that. But there's technology in the works that would help to prevent that. Like I don't know if you've heard of FIAT, but FIAT has there's people talking about using a FIAT model to create a federated pool, which is basically like a decentralized mining pool. Pretty cool. Gets rid of some of the problems of pool centralization, since it's a decentralized pool. But that doesn't actually stop the problem of the Riot and Marathon and others having a huge amount of actual just machines centralized. We were given a bit of a boon on that when things like Core Scientific, Celsius, and others went bankrupt, because those machines are going to be dumped on the market. Now, a large number of them are going to be snapped up by the big players, but a lot of them will either directly or indirectly end up in the hands of smaller players. So people running in the home miners, I think, will never get priced out, because as long as you have a use for the heat, you can always do that. So people using once the mining for heat technology gets built into other things, that will serve as a point of decentralization. But the small and medium scale miners are the ones that are likely to be hurt most. And those are the ones that provide a lot of the decentralization now. The couple 100 kilowatts oil field, well, they're not going to get priced out because they have effectively a zero cost basis for the power, and they can run older equipment. But on grid 1, 2, 3 megawatt, 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt, even 100 megawatt medium sized miners, you might see some problems with them. And yeah, I say that as being one. So
yeah, no, I think, well, what's cool to think about is it just fuels like more innovation, because like you're saying, like the guys who have no cost basis, like flaring or what have you, they're not going to get priced out. So I think as Bitcoin continues to rise in price, that innovation the fire to find more innovation will be there. But it's also a good transition point as well to like exactly what your company does is, at-home miners. Like you're saying that, they'll always be there if they have a use for the heat. But I think, a lot of people, they're paying, I don't even know what the average price is, 15, 20 cents kilowatt hour, maybe. I live in Wyoming too, so it's pretty cheap, where it might be at 11, 12 in Thermopolis. But inherently, these hosting companies came about, and there was a whole bunch of issues, right? Like Compass and these guys. I remember I looked at it for a bit and I was like, oh, that seems nice, because theoretically what they're doing is, giving you cheaper electricity and you buy in. But maybe explain what the model is for that, and then how you're doing it differently here in Wyoming.
So people like Compass, they basically gave you a contract. You would buy a machine through them. They would plug it in for you. They would find a spot for it, and they would charge you a relatively good rate. And when they were working, they were good. They grew so fast that they outstripped their capacity, and they have I believe they have growing pains, and that they got outside of a little bit outside of their skill set, and basically stopped performing. It's awesome when they worked, and that you'd have cheap power and a good machine and sats flowing straight into your wallet. But then when you were down, you were still paying, as if you were up. So if you had a $200, if you had like an S19 that would cost you $200 a month, you were paying that $200 a month whether the machine was on or off. At least that's my understanding. And it's great if it's running, if you have 100% uptime, but you get 80% uptime and all of a sudden you're underwater. So and then so people would start requesting their machines back. It would take months to get the machines back, and it's still going on, where there's just a lot of problems with it. So what we did is we started a mining company. We're small. We're running 1.5 megawatts, so that's roughly 350, 400 machines. And you have to send us your machine. So we don't buy a machine for you. You're sending us your machine. We're plugging it in for you. We're giving you our power rate plus a premium. So we charge our customers 9 to 11 cents depending on the number of machines. And if your machines are down, we're not getting paid either. So it's fairly straightforward in that respect. Whereas other companies, they may or may not charge you that way. We just want to make sure that all of the incentives were in line, so that the chances of people getting having a bad experience were minimized. If a machine's not hashing, you're not paying us. Yeah, granted, you're missing out on the sats, but we're also not charging you, so we're not getting paid. So our incentive is to get those things back online as fast as possible. We also provide VPN. So is it really your machine hashing for you if you can't log into it and check? Right? Well, I have heard stories of people who, after they have removed their machines from Compass, they were still getting hash. How is that possible? Something's up, right? They're not getting the actual machine. So your machine, that one with that serial number, is hashing to your pool that you put in, and if you want to check on it, you can dial into that machine and you can check on it. We actively manage it in the sense that we make sure that we have open source software that we helped to build with Brad at Upstream called PIASIC that monitors the machines on a minute by minute basis, checks to see if they're hashing happy, or if they're not. If they're not, we get an alert. You get an alert, and we do what we can to fix it. Hopefully, before you even find out that there was a problem. And of course, you'll see the problem, but we'll be able to tell you, hey, your machine had a problem and we fixed it. Here you go. So it's basically a high level of service. There's other small, medium-sized hosting companies that provide this, but this is not something that a large company like Compass has been able to provide thus far. And so we think that's our competitive advantage. Yeah, you're gonna pay more for service like ours, but ideally, it'll still be inside the profit band for you. And if hash rate is going up, or if price is going up, that's pretty easy to do. But in addition to that, we also did some research. So we found out that at certain points, where's the price point that you should put your machines into low mode, and which is a higher efficiency mode that produces less. You lose about 10% of your hash rate, but burn about 15% less energy. So when should you do that? Temperature, certainly, summer, or if the Bitcoin price crashes. So what are the metrics? And so we put out a paper on that. We put out a paper on airflow mechanics and how to optimize airflow.
If the price crashes, you would want to do that?
Yeah. So if the price crashes, with hash rate staying constant,
because you want to keep the energy or consumption down.
Yeah. You want to drop your energy.
Getting as much reward.
Exactly. Yeah. And of course, similarly, you can. Does it make sense ever to put your machines into like high mode where they're burning a lot more energy for a little bit more hash? And maybe, probably not, in my opinion. But some people want to just. It's in that case, it's a trade-off between capital and you can get more machines and run them at higher efficiency, or you can take the fewer number of machines and just crank them.
That's cool. I didn't know. So you're saying there's a couple other people doing similar business models in smaller scale situations? Or?
I think that we're the best ones, but there's others that are doing similar business models on the smaller scale. Some don't advertise. Some are out there. Some do. But we're the ones that are out there, putting out the research that we found and trying to put back the stuff that we've learned in the community for other. For other participants to learn. And also we now have a partnership with CryptoCloaks where the shrouds that he built, which were designed initially to allow you to connect your machines to HVAC, we figured out that the shrouds and with a little bit of a modification actually increase the efficiency of the machines by 3 to 5%. So you can pay for a shroud once, get a permanent 3 to 5% increase. It's pretty beautiful.
That's like a 3D printed little
it's a 3D printed funnel.
Thing. Yeah.
It basically creates a Venturi effect where the main hashboard fans, which are very powerful, push and create a low pressure zone, which allows the PSU fan to be shielded from any other pressure and pull into that. So one of the big problems when you have a multiple machines in a row is the machines will basically pressurize the space, and the hashboard fans can overcome that, but the power supply fans can't. So you can use these shrouds to shield the power supply fans from the pressure wall that is being created.
How has the perception been where you're mining? So you're getting your 1.5 megawatts now. I know you're looking to increase power consumption. I think you're the largest, or going to be the largest power consumer in the town.
Yep.
Wyoming, probably.
And not don't say the town, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We can, or how is the community? Like, are people asking questions? Is it noisy outside? Like, do people even know that that's?
So we are a quarter mile maybe a little more than a quarter mile away from a residential area. We're in the middle of an industrial park. So our neighbors don't care. In fact, our immediate neighbors love us because they.
Did you upgrade like all the?
We upgraded the
local distribution equipment.
Well, yeah, we had to upgrade the power in the incoming power, and we added a lot more. We added internet infrastructure to the building that they didn't have before. But really, where they loved us is in the winter. We just dumped the heat into their spaces, so they didn't have to turn their oil fired furnaces on. We saved them, I think, $400 or $500 a month. From not having to do that, just because we could dump our heat as waste into their space. So, I mean, even in that relatively minor industrial environment, we saved somebody else from having to turn on their heat. But the residential neighborhood, no complaints whatsoever. The municipality that we're in loves us because we're paying our bills. We're there improving things, and we're in the process of negotiating to do a bigger site with and take additional capacity that they can't monetize right now off their hands. So overall, it's been at worst neutral, and when it's not neutral, it's been overwhelmingly positive.
I think it's crazy how we're talking about how they're producing basically more than the area can consume. And people don't understand that that's like a thing. Like how often is that happening? Is it like mostly rural areas, you think, or
no, everywhere?
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, if you don't have, basically they have to plan for generating more power than will be used in a common. It's like
you have to overcompensate all the time.
It's like you can't build a bridge to just barely handle the weight of a single car. Because what happens if that single car now is packed full of people and is extra heavy? So you have to plan your distribution for the worst day that you're likely to get. So they're generating all this extra power that's literally being thrown away, because an electron in a wire has a lifetime measured in milliseconds. So if you don't use the force that's embodied in that electron pretty much immediately, it's gone. So they have to burn it. They have to generate all this excess power to make sure that if everybody turns on their heaters all at once and somebody needs an MRI in the hospital, that MRI can get done. Otherwise, you have brownouts, you have blackouts, and you see that happen when there's a mismatch between demand and production. So in the electrical world, that's just very, very bad. And the other side of the coin is if they do it wrong, they can actually wreck their equipment. So they have to be very careful about how they do these things. So by bringing on a load like a Bitcoin miner that is willing to, you send us a message either electronically or by phone or however you need to. It's like, hey, we need you to shut off, and we do. That gives them that much more buffer in terms of how fast they have to deal with making sure that homes and schools and hospitals can demand power. Whereas if they have to, what happens if somebody's in the OR and they have to, wait, we gotta spin up this boiler over here. It's going to take 7 hours. I
was just going to say, you guys were producing enough power to heat your own building and then your neighbors' buildings.
Yep. Well, it's a single building, but so we basically.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
We have one bay in a larger building, and so we were producing so much heat that it heated the entire building.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a megawatt of heat is a lot of heat. Mm-hmm. It's actually like if you think about a space heater is a kilowatt or 1,000 watts, or a blow dryer is 1,000 watts, 1,500 watts, 2,000 watts, something like that. Multiply that by 10,000, and that's a lot of heat. I mean, if you go in the hot tunnel, so the way a industrial scale miner, there's multiple ways to build it. One of those ways is a hot tunnel where you have all the miners blowing into a tunnel, and so all the heat is collected and then removed from the building with one big fan. That's how we have ours built. even when the incoming air from the outside from the Wyoming winter was like -40, it was 130 degrees in that hot tunnel. So that's what a megawatt will do.
Do you think there's an advantage to being like further north?
Yeah.
Like,
so
do you think that's gonna? Well, I don't know. Canada's electricity price has got to be terrible.
Well, there's that. I mean, all electricity prices being held constant, generally speaking, chillier is better to a point. It's not actually true that that cold is good for electronics. It's actually cold is much worse than hot if the electronics can be smart enough to shut themselves off before they liquefy, which miners are. Like they're designed to run hot, so they know when they're getting too hot and they turn themselves off and they save themselves. Too cold is actually more tricky, because if you have a system that is running at let's in Celsius, let's call it 95 Celsius all the time, and then you turn it off, and because it's so small and so thin, it does release its heat very quickly. So it goes from 95 Celsius to -40, and then you turn it back on. That will cause things to crack and break. And that's actually a sticky situation that you have to plan for. So we actually have to heat the building in the winter a little bit. So we do. That's why we started recirculating that heat, was so that we are not taking in -40 degree air and directly dumping it onto the hash boards, because then you get this really big temperature gradient, and the electronics don't like it. So to a point, lower temperatures are better. What's really good about Wyoming is that it's so dry. You don't want desert conditions, because most deserts are just hot. So Wyoming is a unique spot where you have very dry air that does get cold and doesn't get too hot. The number of 100-degree days that we should expect aren't all that high, unlike, say, Vegas, where it's 115 all the time. So it doesn't get too hot. It does get very cold, but if you know what you're doing, you manage the cold, and it's very dry. And in the parts of Wyoming where we're operating, we're at about 4,000 feet of elevation, which is about the top you're going to want to be. Any higher than that, you run into problems where there's just not enough air, and that's when you start needing to look into things like using water or oil, so you can really upsize your radiators. But Wyoming's just a really great balance of the location, the price of electricity, the climate, and the fact that there isn't a lot of people around, so nobody really complains about the noise, because they are loud.
Yeah, I think that's, well, first off, I think it's crazy how much energy is wasted, and it's hard to get a exact figure. I think it's almost impossible, but I've seen 25%, 50% of and it, if you want to get into the weeds of like generation and what's lost at that stage versus transmission and everything. But it's clear that Bitcoin miners offer like a really great way to utilize that energy and monetize it in a decentralized fashion. So that's really cool. The cold thing makes sense to me, because we used to do like, if you don't know, most semiconductors are rated like -40 C, I think is like the minimum. Yeah. We had to do a couple parts that were like -55 extended for like mil aero or something like that. And that's when it's 40 C is also like 40 Fahrenheit, or I don't know where the meeting
minus 40 is -40.
Yeah. So that makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting because there is such like a heavy concentration in Texas and kind of warmer areas, but I guess they're just spending more on cooling in that regard.
And if we did get a situation where we were at an extreme high temperature for an extended period of time, because the air is so dry, we could deploy something like a water curtain that would add some humidity, but that would knock down the temperature very, very effectively without adding too much humidity. And the thing about the humidity is that the lower humidity, but not non-zero humidity, is good, is that it keeps the dust down. Too low, and you build up a lot of static electricity. Too high, and the dust becomes sticky, and just gloms onto things. And heaven forbid you're anywhere near the ocean, in which case you get the humidity with the salt in it, and that will actually corrode the aluminum too.
So kind of high level, how do you see like the perception of Bitcoin mining? Like, the left is obviously super critical. Like, do you see this as like a large concern from, it getting banned in the US at a high level, or in general, what do you think are like risks or common fears that people have about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining that maybe are more truthful or than others?
Well, it does use a lot of power. And if somebody were to set up a mine in a spot that isn't ready for it, then that could be problematic. I don't see anybody doing that, because the places that aren't ready for it are probably the places that have the rates that are too high. And a utility that knows what you're doing and is willing to work with you and understands what you're doing is going to be A, ready for it, and B, not going to charge you an arm and a leg, because they're going to want the demand response. So the moment you can do the demand response, the moment you can do load leveling for the grid, you're not going to be raising the prices for homeowners. That's I think the biggest concern is FUD around Bitcoin miners artificially raising the prices for everyone else, which is completely false, because you're providing a service that the grid needs. And is it more expensive to let somebody buy power at a lower price or build another power plant because you need to meet a peak demand otherwise? Whereas the Bitcoin miners are basically paying for that power plant. And yeah, they're not paying the same rate as homeowners and businesses, but they're paying it day in and day out constantly, and are willing to turn off at a moment's notice. So, and that's also the reason why people say that Bitcoin mining can help with green energy. So if you believe that we need more wind and solar, well, Bitcoin mining can level those things too, and provide a higher economic rationale for those things. The noise is a concern. If people want to put a industrial scale miner in a residential community, that's just dumb. Like, it's noisy, and there's no easy way around that. You can do mitigation and things, but realistically, you don't want to put these things in the middle of a residential community, because that's where the people are. So put it near the substations. Nobody wants to live next to the substation. Put it next to the substation, or put it next to the power plant. I mean, one of the best spots to do it is to just take the power coming straight out of the generator without having to transform it. Every single time you put power through a transformer, you have a couple of a little bit of inefficiency. So if you can do your demand leveling directly at the power plant, that's even better, because there's no efficiency loss there, or minimal efficiency loss. So the things that I think that people will complain about are the things that you aren't the smartest business moves anyway. Aside from that, you've got, crypto, Bitcoin, all of these things can be used for crimes. All right.
That's like the biggest one I hear from everybody. It's like scam.
Yeah. Well, find me $100 bill that doesn't have cocaine on it.
I'm gonna have to look through Tristan's $100 bills.
Like the biggest currency used for scams in the world is the US dollar, right? Like, yeah, Bitcoin can be used for scams. So can gold. So can francs, or francs haven't existed in a while, but euros and dollars and yen, all these things can be used for scams. Okay, so what? Is Bitcoin used by criminals? Sure. Is English used by criminals? Yeah. That's kind of a dumb argument to me. And the other side of that coin, granted, this is an argument I tend to give toward more conservative leaning people than more liberal leaning people, but it's okay. Well, what's a criminal? A criminal is somebody that the dominant authority doesn't like. Well, what if the dominant authority doesn't like your Second Amendment rights? Are you a criminal? Okay, well,
it's sort of like history is written by the victor, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this in a more liberal bent. What if you want to pay for an abortion, and the current regime doesn't want you to get one. Well, if they can shut off your credit card because they can monitor your transactions, nobody should like authoritarianism. Nobody, because they can just control your life by telling your bank that we don't want you to make that transaction. And,
so that goes back to something you said earlier that probably, I don't know, Ryan and most people may have missed is non-KYC sats.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe explain why that's important, and obviously how you can get that from mining. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty hard to do outside of mining, or maybe a bit risky.
Yeah. So KYC is the regulation. It stands for Know Your Customer. It's the thing that the financial institution and the financial regulators have used. It's often coupled with AML, which is anti-money laundering. The concept being that every financial institution should know who they are dealing with and track the flow of the money. Up until the past couple of decades, you could always use cash, and cash is, generally speaking, significantly less traceable than anything electronic. Not that it's not traceable, it's just less traceable. If you have a debit card and you buy something with it, well, we can follow that money. We know the bank, we know the other side of your counterparty, we know their bank, and all of those things. Bitcoin has the same problem. It's a public ledger. Literally everyone in the world who has a Bitcoin node can follow your money. But we don't know whose is whose unless the actual coins or actual sats are traceable to a wallet. So I have a KYC wallet, which everyone knows I've deposited into because I bought it off of Kraken, I bought it off of Strike or whatever. So everybody knows that those exist. And I may or may not have what's called a KYC free wallet, where there are sats that are not directly traceable to me exist. Mining is one of the ways you can get those sats, because when you mine, at least at the moment, you put in your email address, which could be Proton Mail, it could be another anonymous email, and that's the only thing that traces you back to that. So if you have a throwaway email, and there's even ways of mining to a pool where you just put the receiving address inside the header that you program into the ASIC itself, so that you don't even need to have an account. Well, those sats aren't really directly traceable to you, because you can make that address anything you want at any time. So because those are not traceable to you, they're money that nobody knows that you have. And this is not just about the government. Let's be clear. This is not about hiding from the IRS. This is not about hiding from the FBI or your ex in a court proceeding or whatever. You don't necessarily want your neighbors to know how much money you get deposited every month from your job. You don't necessarily want the criminal down the street to know, oh, he got paid today. That all of these KYC systems are giant honeypots, and they're giant ways of people getting attacked by criminal elements, by unsavory scammers, or even by their own government if they decide to say something that is against the dominant narrative that day. So everyone should be looking to have some sort of KYC free capacity in some way because of that.
No, so I actually had one last question about the energy thing, mm-hmm. but it got me thinking when we were just talking about this. I can't remember what it's called, but there's going to be like that new government funnel where like everything goes through this digital funnel, and so I'm assuming you hate that.
Yeah, the CBDCs. I think.
Yeah. So
CBDCs are basically the apotheosis of traceable money, where they could tell you, hey. It's easier to see what they're doing in China than the United States. But look, in China, it's like, oh, you didn't smile enough today, so we're going to fine you, and we're just going to take the money out of your bank account.
It's sort of like in like New York City, I think, is like one of the cities where they're going to start monitoring how much animal product you buy, and all that sort of stuff. It's insane.
Well, if you can look at it right now, the credit card companies have codes for every type of merchant. And let's just say, gun stores, they have a code for gun stores. You go into a gun store, oh, you spent $300 at a gun store today. Or gas stations, oh, you bought $75 worth of gas. Oh, I think that we know what the price of that gas station was at that moment. That means you bought this many gallons. You're over your carbon allotment. Or you bought cigarettes, or you bought beef, or whatever. They will be able to track these things. They can track these things to at a one level of resolution. Now they get CBDCs, and that resolution goes not only to everything you do, but they can also shut it off, because if every dollar that you have has to go through the government to change hands, they can just stop that transaction right there.
So interesting. It seems like all these things seem to be so far from what we were built on. It's just like a whole nother discussion. But as far as the energy thing, I heard a stat, and it's completely wrong because I can't remember the actual stat, but it was something like that the power grid's going to need so much X more power by 2050. And it was a discussion on green energy and how basically no current green energy, besides like nuclear, which no one seems to be super mega keen on, unless you're in China where they're building like hundreds of plants in the next like 15 years or something like that. But like, you're not going to be able to X energy with solar or wind. And actually there was a really good comparison when they were comparing, like you could have 500 acres of solar and you would produce still 100 times less energy than like one nuclear plant or something like that. But do you see like Bitcoin fitting into like helping fill that gap of energy being put back into the grid for like future energy needs? Because like those are only going to go up.
Mm-hmm. So what being a demand response system and a way of monetizing difficult to monetize projects, Bitcoin will be able to play a role in that respect. In terms of will it cause us to need more energy? Yeah, but that's okay because it's levelized energy. So like we had talked about earlier, in order to provide this level of energy, you need to be able to produce this much energy. So you have to build all this. Well, if you have the ability to compress that because you're always running at a higher level, and because the Bitcoin can just drop the floor out, and so now you can all of a sudden have that gap there, then that will allow us to basically do more with less. And so what seems like inefficiency to some people is actually more efficient overall. One problem with the word efficiency is its efficiency requires a purpose. So is a Ferrari efficient? It will get you from point A to point B really, really freaking fast as long as you have a road. Is a Mack truck efficient? What's your purpose? Are you trying to get from point A to point B really freaking fast, or do you want to haul a bunch of crap? What about a deuce and a half? Well, a deuce and a half can do it without a road, or a tank can do it without a road. So efficiency is about what it is you're trying to do and how well you can do that thing. And if you optimize for one type of efficiency, you effectively de-optimize for other types of efficiency, and you make yourself more fragile. So the moment that Ferrari hits a pothole, that's a pretty expensive mistake. Whereas if you have a deuce and a half and it hits a pothole, do you even notice? Right? Like,
yeah, I mean, that just sustainable, that like encapsulates what's wrong with just like sustainable, the whole green ESG movement, I think. Because renewable and renewable sources like wind and solar, they sound great on paper, but they're really actually only meant to work in a kind of decentralized fashion, I think. And they're great for homesteading, and if you can just put them on places like roofs that just don't occupy otherwise like areas of space and land, public land.
Yes, there's nothing wrong with solar and wind. The problem is using it, or attempting to use it as a base load. Like, and Marty Bent talks about
at
this.
Scale.
Yeah. Like, would I put solar on my house? Would I put a windmill up at a ranch? Absolutely, I would do these things. I'm not against these things. I'm just trying to make it so that is the entire way you're generating your power. When there are the known problems of it being intermittent, and the wind blows when the wind blows, not when people want power. And the same with the sun. The sun is coming up and coming down on a very fixed schedule, but people want power, not necessarily in line with that. And who's to know that all of a sudden today we're having exactly the problem in Texas. They had a cold snap. Everybody needed power, and the windmills had frozen. They couldn't get it. They wouldn't generate power, and even though the wind was blowing. So that's why you need a mix of power from different sources that are not correlated, and that's also why you need a base load so that you can handle the peaks and valleys of all of these things. And the Bitcoin makes those peaks and valleys smaller because it provides a buffer. It's a spring.
Yeah, I think that's the message. To be honest, it's like the fragility of the grid is real. Mm-hmm. People don't really understand how that works and how fortunate they are to just turn on their lights and have power. I think first off, everyone should think about how many steps, how much has gone into that right there. And that, Bitcoin can help mitigate some of that, complexity in stressful environments in terms of demand response. But what's the last question is, how do we get that message out there to people to resonate? Like, what's a good way to educate people on this?
I think it's getting out there. I think it's actually, it's interesting that you see several of the political players in this upcoming presidential election. Two of them did their announcements at Bitcoin 23. You had RFK and Vivek Ramaswamy, so a Democrat and a Republican, both coming out doing a big political thing at Bitcoin 23. Granted, I don't think anybody would say that they are the front runners, but that's not what matters here. What matters here is that they thought it was not just important, but advantageous of them to do this. You have Elizabeth Warren coming out and saying, I'm building an anti-crypto army, and just getting totally thrashed. You have the New York Times running a hit piece on Riot, and within an hour, everybody finding out that they're lying. And of course, in this environment where everyone sees the media lying about but specifically I'm referring to their photograph, everybody has a left and right has a strong holds the media to a that they're basically lying all the time anyway. I think that is we're at a turning point where a lot of the FUD, a lot of the misinformation about Bitcoin is just going to die, or at least become significantly less impactful, because one, a lot more people have it or some lesser crypto, and they see how all of these things are being done, and people are being the media is lying, and things are getting communities that have these things are getting better, and places that don't. So I don't know. I'm I guess cautiously optimistic for the next couple of years. Yeah, we're going to have some setbacks. Yeah, there's going to be some pain. There always is. But overall, I think it's the trajectory is in the right direction.
And I think it's a good thing to be like that way, cautiously optimistic. That's a good way to put it, because I think there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. Mm-hmm. But, there are these bright spots, and you just got to keep having that positive mindset and spreading the message and telling people that have no idea. But because things got so bad, people had to learn. Mm-hmm. They were forced to realize that inflation matters. They were forced to realize that maybe we shouldn't be trusting our government about every single thing. They're forced to maybe consider where their food comes from, mm-hmm. and maybe where, especially in Europe, where their energy comes from. So then they start asking questions. So I think this whole narrative to me that like we're just a sinking ship, it's like, no, I think when you get into these really rough spots, it wakes up a lot of people, and then, you know, they become more knowledgeable, they become more empowered. Then we right the ship. That's my thought. I mean, obviously, you could go down the CBDC, you know, social credit score rabbit hole, but I think it's better to be optimistic. But Bitcoin prepares you for the worst on both sides.
I figure, if things go well and we don't need Bitcoin, that's great. If things go badly and we need Bitcoin, then, you know, everybody should have some. Yeah, but I think we're in the area where if we didn't have it, the CBDCs, the social credit scores, that would be a fait accompli already. But the fact that it exists has been just it existing is enough to make it so that these things couldn't be put in place as quickly or as silently as they otherwise would have been.
And the way I see it, if New York City and LA and SF, they want to do some crazy shit, like, by all means. But I have a hard time believing that stuff's going to fly here.
Yeah. Not here in Wyoming. No.
So that's why we're here. All right, Colin. Well, this is a great conversation. Where can people find more about you, about your mining, if they want to mine with you?
Well, the company is Distributed Hash. You can find me on Twitter at Arcerus_BTC. I'm also on Nostr. And yeah. So it's pretty much those are pretty much the places.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining. It's always a great pleasure to have a conversation here in the great state of Wyoming.
Excellent.
So thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.